if you're going to be living here and just keep flicking on and off my lights, can you at least pay rent? Figures. Can you believe it's nearly been 2 years since I started this YouTube channel? 2 years of me recording podcasts with my mates and playing video games. I don't know, that's a bit of a milestone for me. Yeah, that's right people, 2 years of recording for YouTube. And not only that, I have reached 100 subscribers, over 100 subscribers. And I have nothing planned for it. I'll be honest, I never expected to even reach 100 subscribers till like 2023. I know it might sound like I'm saying I'm doing a low bar, but my videos aren't exactly top YouTube quality, if you know what I mean. Sure, I have Sean to help edit the podcast and stuff like that, but really 90% of my YouTube videos is primarily me editing it, recording it, and streaming it. And even then, I'm not as active on my Twitch anymore due to the fact my family are going through some things. My brother's moved back home, so we're having to try and find new ways to do our normal thing. But then I got the idea last month before October to do a sort of celebration for October. And why October? October's the month of Halloween. Halloween has to be, to me, my favourite holiday. Even though 90% of the stores in the UK, for some reason, already have Christmas decorations up for Christmas, even though we haven't even hit November yet. But I love Halloween. The horrors, the monsters, the creepiness, and the creative costumes that kids and adults have made for each other. And of course, candy. Let's be real here, that's one of the main things we all love, even adults, we just love sweets. But not only is it Halloween month, it's also the month of my birthday. I'm going to be turning 25 this year. And I still live with my mum. And I record videos of me playing video games. But enough self-loathing, let's talk about what I wanted to do for Billyween, as I dubbed it, if you saw the opening to this video. Billyween was meant to be like, essentially me playing all sorts of randomised games, as well as talk about horror subjects. And one of the things I wanted to end the first Billyween on was talking about my top 8 favourite horror games that I've played specifically for this channel. Now okay, I wouldn't say a lot of these games I've played I would say the scariest of all time, however I do feel like for this channel I do have my favourites that I've played and recorded or streamed. So I figured hitting 100 subscribers, it's Halloween month and it's going to be my birthday soon. In fact it might be my birthday by the time this video gets out, depends on if I'm a fast editor. I wanted to talk about all my favourite horror games that I've played for this channel, including main Let's Plays and even those one-off games that I'd play from time to time. So just sit back, get yourself a mug of tea, get yourself some sweets, and let's dive into the top 8 favourite horror games I've played for this channel. My fishing vacation. You know, I actually am surprised at how uncomfortable I felt playing this game. Let me give you a little story. I have an account on Itch.io and GameJolt in which I look around for free games, whether I feel like recording it or if it just looks like a fun game to play. However, there was something interesting that caught my eye about my fishing vacation, or not just that, a lot of games on Itch.io. I've rounded up a whole bunch of games in like an old school art style of either Game Boy or PlayStation. It is kind of weird how like so many people just seem to love playing games that look old. Like, I guess people just like the retro style of games these days. And my fishing vacation was a very interesting game, starting off to look like a very old traditional Game Boy game similar to the games like Earthbound and Pokemon. I will admit, at first I was going to this thinking, how could this game scare me? You know, how could it make me feel uneased and uncomfortable? But this game had some genuinely good scares in it. Not even like jump scaring scares, just it like builds the tension a lot. Example, you open into the game, teaches you the basics, hunting worms, and then you're fishing, and then you have to reel it in. And you know, that's how every game starts in clone horror games. Sometimes they don't just immediately throw the monsters at you. It has to build up the monster and stuff like that. But when you get to your second or third fishing day, that's when you notice some weird things going on. So for starters, you're hearing whispers as you're like fishing. There's this figurine just standing by the trees. You don't know who it is or what they look like. It happens for like a split second that you can miss it. And then as the game's mechanic goes on and you're fishing and reeling in things, it gives you a little image showing you your bait is being captured. But in this instance, a hand emerged from the water and grabs your reel. I have to admit, it's a shame I didn't have a face cam during that time, because holy crap, that generally made me spike up. Like, it was so uncomfortable. Not only that, on your last day of fishing, when you're digging up the worms for your bait, as you dig further and further in, you discover a corpse in the gravel. And it's just the idea that this corpse was there this whole time while you were digging up worms. You know, what looked like a cute little mini game to just earn extra items to help your progress. It turns out there was a reason there was so many worms in that specific spot. There was a corpse. That is so creepy. What's funny as well is like most of that minigame, there's all this like pop-in music, it's all cheerful. But the moment you dig up the body, the music goes silent. It doesn't do some annoying, ear-piercing violin noise to scare you. It lets you take in the fact that you just dug up a corpse. Now, what puts this at the bottom of my list? There was no payoff, really. It's like that one night when you do catch a glimpse of the monster that's in your garden. That's it. Unless you got the bad ending when a monster captures you in the end. There's no real payoff. The story is interesting, I will give it that. But the payoff for the monster just was not there. Don't get me wrong, the build-up was definitely creepy. It was just unfortunate that the scary monster just wasn't exactly great. I don't know how to describe it, but if you do want to see me play the full game, including getting, I think I got all the endings, or maybe I only got 3 of them, I'll put a link to it in the description, and even check out the developer, because they did a really good job with this game. Little Nightmares 2. Now, I wasn't sure what to expect from Little Nightmares. When I played the first one, it was a fascinating game to me. You see, with most horror games, they tend to throw in a narration explaining everything that's going on. You know, they give the story of your character, you know, your character's doing their own inner monologue. But the first game had none of that. The game literally opens up, you wake up, you're in a case, where the hell are you? The game lets you explore and find the little details to help further explain where you are. But at the end of the game, you don't actually know the context of the world, and I think, while some people see that as lazy, I think that's brilliant, because it could help build up a foundation of what could be for the future of this franchise. And I didn't even know there was a sequel coming out this year, and when I found out, I was like, I'm playing that. I'm either streaming it or I'm recording it. And wow, what this game had was amazing. Just like what I wanted from the first game, it built the foundation of what this franchise could be. And just like the first one, you don't know what is going on. Much like when you played as 7 in the first game, you played as, I think this character was called Baghead. Future me editing his figurine and what his title is. And yeah, you start off the game not knowing where you are or who you are. The only thing that you see is that you have a bag on your head, you're in the woods, but there's a TV there, which at first I didn't pay much attention to it. But that TV becomes important as you progress through the game. Along the way you meet a companion, which to me, at first, I wasn't too sure on, but a companion in the Little Nightmares universe is brilliant. You gotta think, you have all the odds stacked against you, there are monsters everywhere. You are a little insect compared to these monstrosities. They are relentless and will not hesitate to kill you. And unlike in the first game, we kind of got more of an idea of what the society of these giants kind of resembles. So we get an idea of like, this was once a civilization where people were just like probably normal folks. But then something happened which had something to do with that giant static tower that cause people to go insane, either become disfigured or just outright dead. Like, we don't know what happened to most of these people, we just see their clothes about. And the few people that were actually... I swear, I can read. And the few people that were affected by the static went through some really odd changes. There's this school lady whose neck could stretch really long, and it reminded me too much of that Quan Chi fatality from Mortal Kombat, and I don't like it. There was that guy at the morgue who could straight up climb on the ceiling like he was some sort of Spider-Man. And then there's those mannequins that just moved when you weren't looking, and if you weren't shining a light on them. Now, what puts this exactly just only above Fishing Vacation? There's a few things kind of on this back, but I played the Xbox One version, and there were moments where sometimes the controls didn't work. For instance, when I was trying to push this TV, for some reason Baghead just dropped. I don't know why he just dropped, he just dropped. And the combat. Okay, look. I like the fact that developers wanted to try and put more type of unique enemies in the game, and even boss fights, and even allowed you to actually contribute into fighting off these monsters aside just running away. But the problem is, your characters aren't fighters, they're just people, and the weapons they wield are so heavy that it takes them like half a minute to swing sometimes. And the majority of the time, when I had to fight really fast enemies, most of the time they would get me. Some people tell you if you just wait until you see their unique animation where it tells you to hit them, that's when you swing. The problem is though, your character swings too slow and the enemies are just so fast. Take this instance with the hands from the boss fight in the morgue level. Don't get me wrong, it was a fantastic level and it built the tension. You have to try and escape from this room, but there's these crawling hands that are moving about, and you need to try and time when you can hit them, but they can also dodge you. The problem is though, then they threw in another hand, and they just got so annoying to fight. It got to points I was just like, can I just get out of this level? In saying that though, I loved the game from beginning to end. Boss fight was a little bit annoying, but overall, I loved the game. And I encourage people, if you've not played these games, do yourself a favour and play them, they are fantastic. Or you can go in the description below and watch the one I played. Do it. Number 6. The Last of Us Part 2. Why does it feel like whenever I mention this game, I'm both worried what fans will say and worried what haters will say? I guess we're just going to play both sides of the coin on this one, and why exactly do I put this above the other games? So buckle your seatbelts, kids. Okay, fair enough. I understand why fans were angry with this game. The first game was actually such a beautiful, like, apocalyptic, story-driven game with very creepy elements to it. But there was also this bond between Joel and Ellie that they formed. What started off as just another smuggling job for this mercenary, he ended up finding another reason to live, to be a human. This little girl that he could have been a parent to after she lost her friends and family. But I'm going to be honest here, and this is maybe in a minority when I say this, I don't actually like Joel as a person. Okay, to be clear, it was more so I didn't like him at the end of the game. You see, with everything that Joel and Ellie went through, just to try and find a cure that could stop this whole apocalyptic world, what does Joel do? He murders everybody and kidnaps her! Okay, in Joel's fairness though, he heard Ellie was going to die during this procedure. Ellie didn't know she would die. Except in the second game they kinda do confirm the fact that she knew she was going to die, and she volunteered for it. It's kinda weird, the first game never implied that until the very end of the game, so I always found that weird. Joel didn't just go on a murder rampage and just kidnap this girl. Not only that, lies to her and saying she's not special and they've given up on the cure, and everything she went through, all the trauma, was for nothing. I feel bad for Ellie, because you were brought up to believe you were this key to save humanity, but in the end, it was all a lie. your friends who died and who did all they can to help you and try and free these people from this controlling government doesn't matter. You just don't matter. It's no wonder in the second game she was so miserable for most of the game. Mostly when it got into the Joel and Ellie parts. But that's where it leads me to my understanding of the haters side. Yeah, you killed off a very fan-loved character. Okay, now in all fairness, I kind of applaud a director or writer who has the balls to bring up these epic characters and kill them off. To me, that does take balls. Not sure if I agree with it, but it takes balls. And I will say the characters that kill Joel are justified. I mean, these were the last remainers of the saviors of humanity that Joel killed. He killed their friends and family. I mean, Abby, the second main character of this game, lost her dad in the hospital bit. But at the same time, I feel like they could have done something more with Abby. Alright, let me actually get to the actual game, The Last of Us Part 2 that I played. Now, I will say this, and this might be a controversial opinion, I prefer the gameplay of The Last of Us Part 2 over the first one. I know that's an unfair comparison. This game came out in 2012, so obviously its controls are going to be a little clunky and a bit outdated, but at the same time, I've played games that were older than this one that play much smoother. Banjo-Kazooie is an old game, yet I can still play that with the controls working just fluently. Grandpa the Ghoulies is another game, which I think is actually an underrated game, where you can just play it about freely and the controls just feel so smooth to play. Or hell, even Halo 2, despite how old that game is, I can still go back and play it, even if I wasn't playing the remastered version, I was playing the original Xbox version. Yeah, for some reason The Last of Us 1 just doesn't feel good to play. Joel's just so heavy when he runs and when he's sneaking that it almost feels like you're just dragging a sack of potatoes through the stages. It's so underwhelming. And I'm not sure if it's just me, but the gunplay just felt so unsatisfying. The pistol combat was just not fun. It wasn't until fun until I got the sniper rifle and the shotgun and machine gun. Even the bow and arrow was just not that great to use, at least for my take. The Last of Us 2 fixed a lot of issues I had. Since you're not playing as Joel and you're playing as Ellie, she's a lot more faster than he is. And I won't lie, I feel like enemy encounters are way more tense than in the first game. For example, you're always outnumbered. In the first game, you always had a companion with you, and yes, you do get some companions in the game that help you out from time to time, mostly in Abby's story. But most of the time, Ellie was a lone wolf. And every encounter with Ellie, you had to be very precise and try and plan out how you're going to do a lot of these things. Because you're always going to be outgunned, very low on ammo. But what I also liked as well is that you could use the environment to your advantage. Or one that I did in my Let's Plays, when I triggered a bomb to go off when a guard went over there to check on my last position. And he got himself killed, but he lured all the guards and all the guard dogs away so that I could sneak around them and get to the exit. It was really satisfying sneaking past enemies. Another thing is, with the guard dogs, if you were to kill their owner, the guard dogs would actually walk over to their owner's body and try and get them to move, because they're really sad for them, giving you an opportunity to run away. Yeah, it's a little dark and messed up, but the fact the game put that much detail into the guard dog and the enemy variations, it's really cool. I know I'm talking a lot about the gameplay, but what did I think about the horror aspect? Well, that's why this one isn't as high as the next few games. Don't get me wrong, there were genuinely scary moments in this game when you played as Abby. Yeah, when you played as Abby, I felt like there was more tension with the horror aspect, especially when you encountered a lot more of the newer enemies, but 99% of the time with Ellie, you were kind of fighting human enemies. Now granted, near the end of Abby's story, that was also the case. But when you got to those very quiet places, and when you're in those like clicker-infested areas, that's when it got scary and tense. Two of my most memorable ones, when you're playing as Abby and you're going through the hospital trying to find medical equipment, but there's something stalking you in a way. You open this one room and it just seems like it's just all a bunch of flesh. But you're noticing there's claw marks everywhere. Walls have been caved open and doors have been smashed down. There's loads of blood everywhere. You encounter clickers and stalkers, sure, but it gave you an impression there was something after you, and it wasn't until the very end of that level that, yeah, you were way out of your element. Another good example is when you're playing with Lev, you're in this hotel or this big apartment building, but there's no stairs or elevator because the middle of it had been bombarded by military. So you need to get on whatever little platform remains to get out of the place. But of course, there's a catch. The entire building is infested with infected creatures. Bloaters, stalkers, runners, clickers. Pretty much the whole shabam of the zombies. So you have to kind of be careful where you stand, because no matter where you went, there were zombies. But not only that, the creatures that have embedded into the wall could sometimes jump out and grab you. And I swear, I've played this game 3 times after I did the recording, and I feel like I never get jump scared by these same stalkers. I feel like it's always different. It could just be where I'm always paranoid whenever I'm in those areas, but I generally feel like I get jump scared by different variations of the infected as they're popping out of different places. And much like with the human sections, there are multiple ways to get around them. Sure, you could guns blaze, or when I found the flamethrower, you could just burn your way through. But sometimes that's best not, because the more you try and fight off these infected, more seem to get attracted to the fight. So you're better off staying stealthy to get out. And that's when I think The Last of Us is at its best, when you're in the infected areas. It's a shame that this game didn't really tackle a lot of the infected. They were just more or less the background monsters, you know, they're just part of life now in this game's universe, and I don't want that. I feel like what made the first game strong was the infected and its story, but the next game was just all about revenge. And don't get me wrong, the story between the I can't remember what the name of the cult was, I'll put it on screen as well, and the wolves, I thought the war between them was interesting. It's just a shame it got overshadowed by, you know, the revenge plot, which it's not a bad story, but it's not really a memorable one. It's just Ellie wants to kill Abby because Abby killed her dad, and Abby just... It's never clear what Abby's motivations were after she killed Joel. It just felt like she just said, F this, I'm just gonna chill out somewhere. But I still think this game was worthy to be put on this list. I had a lot of fun and memorable moments on my Let's Play. It was a fun game to play. And I do feel like people should try and give this game a chance. I know people kind of boycott it because of the leaked cutscenes, which I never saw online, thankfully, but if you can, it's probably been reduced by now, you should give the game a chance, because it is a generally good game. I feel like the hate online is a bit exaggerated. I mean, it is just a video game that's meant to be fun. And if you don't like the story though, the gameplay is worth it. So take my word for it, as I played the game multiple times. I even tried the permadeath mode. Just give it a go. I feel like you guys will generally find this game creepy and also a bit of a fun game to play, regardless of what you think of the story. Number 5. Don't open your eyes. Again, much like with Fishing Vacation, I was surprised at how good this game was. Now you may be thinking, oh, this looks like just a typical point and click game. And yes, you would be kind of right about that. But what was kind of interesting is that what this game's engine was made on was on the dating simulator engine. Which, if you don't know, it was this free engine you could use where you could make your own dating simulator. One that I played, Dating Siren Head. Why haven't you called me back? Why, Siren Head? What exactly made this game stand out amongst Last of Us Part 2, Little Nightmares 2, and Fishing Vacation? It was kind of the build-up and as well as the uncomfortableness I felt. So as the game goes on, you play as this character who decides to sleep with his bedroom door open. Trust me mate, you don't want to do that. Last time I did that. Never sleep with your bedroom door open. So don't open your eyes. You play as this guy who sleeps with his bedroom door open, and he sort of has this mental image of his bedroom even when he's trying to sleep. I guess it's kind of like a schizophrenia or a paranoia sort of thing that, you know, you want your room to be exactly as you left it before you went bed. But then there was one thing this game did good, and it was with its sound. So as you're sleeping in bed, and this game's definitely best played with your headphones on, and you start hearing footsteps coming from the doorway, and the sound design, it sounds louder as it gets closer. And the build up from that was so uncomfortable. Like, I generally was so uncomfortable without even seeing what was there. And then finally the figurine arrives and you don't know what it looks like or what he looks like. And that's fascinating to me. Because the creepy factor is that you don't know what this person is, yet he decides to kneel over your bed and whisper to you. And because with your headphones in, it generally sounds like he is speaking to you. I feel like horror games that do use sound to that effectiveness is brilliant, because it does add a bit more of that uneasiness. Take for example when you play Resident Evil 2's remake, when the tyrant is stalking around the building looking for you, you actually have to hear his footsteps through your headphones. And it will, depending on where he is in the building or how close he is to you, your headphone will trigger a sound effect where he is. To me, that makes an effective scare where it uses the sounds to sort of mess with your mind. You don't know where the noise is coming from, but you also kind of do, because your headphones hint to where that noise is coming from. To me, that adds more horror to an already creepy game. But what was actually kind of unique was that this creature or person was not hostile at all. What was also kind of interesting is that your character didn't really speak much, and I think that was meant to reflect more so you, because you're in that spot, you're the one that is listening to him, and you had to give your opinion on this man, and every time you give your opinion on whatever body part he's talking about, you build more of an image of the guy, which is kind of unique, because again, you don't know what this man looks like, yet you kind of build the image in your head, and that to me makes it scary. However, much like with Fishing Vacation, while most of the opening and the middle part of the game was fantastic and uncomfortable even, the payoff is not worth it. Yeah, because if you chose to never open your eyes, well, you die. Even when you get the option to open your eyes and no, he just decides to kill you. And you get a glimpse of the guy in his eyes, but that's it really. And I would say, oh, this could add in more to who is this mysterious person. But when you start feeling sympathetic for this character, which I think is what they're trying to do, you can't do anything, and he just decides to murder you, and he kind of foreshadows that he's done this multiple times. And not only that, if let's say when he first tells you to open your eyes during the first encounter and you do it, nothing happens. And that's the same with every single time he asks you to open your eyes before the murder. It is a bit underwhelming that it takes away a lot of that tension and how the game could like change. It does take away a lot of that tension and that mystery around the character. And I would argue maybe this is meant to be like the mind of your paranoid character, just unsure what this person looks like. Maybe he made him up. But then you get murdered by him, so was he an illusion? It's never clear. Like, the story's a little bit whacked, if you know what I mean. However, I do think aside that ending, this game did generally make me uncomfortable to play, and that's what I think a horror game should do. It should make you uncomfortable to play, but you also want to keep playing it because you're so interested in what will happen, what will be the payoff. Sure, it was a disappointing payoff, but I considered it a fun game. And not only that, it's a free game. I did donate to the developer because I did generally enjoy the game. So I'll leave a link to the developer, and hopefully they make more horror games like this, because this is a genuinely good horror game that I played. Number 4. Deep sleep. If you're someone like me, during your school days when you just ignored homework because it was a load of piss, you went on to your IT classes a lot to play a lot of Flash games. One developer I used to play a lot of was Script Welders games, but I mostly played the Don't Escape games. I haven't yet to play the third one and the fourth one, but I have heard they're really good. But if there's one franchise that I never touched because I was too much of a pussy to play, it was the Deep Sleep games. These games were really popular with everyone in my school, Point and click horror games are usually kind of a mixed bag for me because sometimes they can be scary, but sometimes they can just be absolute boredom. But DLC was interesting. So the idea was that you went into such a deep sleep, you were almost in a coma, and you somehow entered this alternative world of your world. And as the game goes on, you start to question a lot of things going on. You start getting these eerie messages telling you to wake up. You start looking for these items, you start seeing these hallucinations. These dark figurines are showing up to try and scare you. There was a lot of mystery around it, and it was really intriguing. I have yet to play these sequels to this game. I've even downloaded all of them on my Steam. So who knows, maybe I'll play them in the future, maybe next year. Maybe I'll even tackle Don't Escape 3 and 4, because Scriptwalder makes some really genuinely good games. And just playing the first Deep Sleep game, there was so many great moments. It was also kind of clever how, like, in this game, when you're in, like, the oven, if you start tapping on the wall, it starts revealing the code. If you discover that early, you wouldn't know where that code would go to. That's the other thing I like about this game, the amount of freedom when you're walking around. Sure, some areas are locked off, but most of the time, you're free to explore everywhere and try and figure out where to go and where your puzzle goes. I like that. I like a game that gives you so much freedom to discover future puzzles that you would have to go back and solve, or if you discover the solution early, then you've already figured out the door or whatever before you did it. I will admit, the items as well was kind of cool, because you find like this gem, you have no idea what it's used for until the very end of your playthrough. And I have to say, I was generally uncomfortable when those shadow monsters appeared. However, I've never seen this, at least not in any point and click games I've played, but the monsters chasing you as you're there. I've rarely ever seen that, so you have to select the thing to escape or just reverse back. In most point and click games, it would either be like a scripted event where you'd run away, or like I said, it's a quick time event where you press a button and you just happen to be saved by the game. But no, the monster appeared right there and you had to select the right way to escape. But yeah, it was just a short game, so there's not really much to say about it, but it was a really scary game and I feel like it definitely deserves to be higher up on the list. But the next few games, if you've been watching my game channels, you would know I'm kind of known for playing more of these games. So, let's move on to number 3. Number 3. Resident Evil 3. Yeah, it was a no-brainer. Eventually the Resident Evil games would pile their way onto my list. And what better to kick off the Resident Evil on the list than with the first game I played on the channel, Resident Evil 3. Now, I know people are kind of mixed on this game because the second remake was such a masterpiece. This game did kind of feel like just DLC, which I do kind of agree, it did just feel like a tagged on DLC story. However, I also love this game. It's a great game, it's generally a lot of fun. I know that a bit that they did cut out, it could have totally been in the original build, but you know, sometimes things get cut out because they didn't like that idea and they just wanted to go with their own, which I'm perfectly understanding for, but I won't lie, Jill being at the Raccoon City Police Department should have been in the main game. After all, she is part of the STARS team, so the fact she never at any point went to a police station was a bit of an unfortunate missed opportunity. However, what made this game scary for me was just all the monsters. Yeah, so as well as the zombies making a return from the second game, and even the lickers at that one point in the game, there was a lot of brand new monsters that I absolutely loved and hated. Let's start off with the new one, the spiders. Which at first I thought were going to be like the spiders from the Resident Evil 1 remake, but no, they were like these weird parasitic spiders, which made an appearance again in Resident Evil 5, or you know, they were in Resident Evil 5, then they made an appearance here, and I guess they were in the original Resident Evil 3, but I'll admit they felt really hammered in, like, I just don't know how to explain it. So for instance, every monster you've encountered in the game had some sort of story around it, where they came from. Even some monsters that make a return had a story about them. these spiders kind of just showed up out of nowhere, which is a bit weird to me. But yeah, the hunters making an appearance, which, if you don't know, I played the Resident Evil 1 remake the year before I played Resident Evil 2's remake and Resident Evil 3's remake. And the hunters, to me, were the scariest monsters. Like, the build-up to these creatures in the first game was brilliant. So you're going back through the areas, you're fighting off all the monsters that you, at this point, you've mastered. You know, the little snakes, just shoot them, they all just flee eventually. Zombies, just shoot them a few times and they'll fall over, then you just burn their bodies and they're dead. But as you get through the door that led back into the mansion, a cutscene played. This cutscene showed something was stalking you. It was in the bushes watching you, and then it's rushing back through everywhere you just went through, and then it opens the door. And all you see is this ginormous lizard that just bursts through the door screeching at you. That has to be the best build up to any monster in the Resident Evil games. And then they recreated that in Resident Evil 3's remake. When the hospital has to be the most scariest part of Resident Evil 3 remake for me. Even whenever I return to the game, it's so uneasy walking through these rooms where it feels like there were meant to be a lot of zombies, but something clearly came through here and killed a lot of them. All you find is like stragglers of zombies, and it's like, what took these zombies out? And you're only given hints on the environment. You see scratch marks, you see bite marks, you see things moving in the shadows that you need to keep an eye out. And then it arrives. It rushes through everywhere you went through until it eventually bursts through the door, revealing the hunters return. And holy crap, the updated model for the hunters looks so good. I love it. I also love the fact as well that when you actually shoot the reptile, its armor sort of depletes as you shoot it, but at the same time it doesn't show that it affects it that much. Because the hunters were meant to be an unrelenting force of unstoppable like hunger and just this predatory sort of like attitude. Hunters were just so like unpredictable, their movement and the way they sped about and sliced through anything. It made them generally a terrifying threat. And unless you had something like the Magnum or acid rounds, yeah, you're in for a tough fight. Especially on harder mode, like, hunters on hardcore mode? Yeah. I don't even want to imagine what they're like on nightmare mode. But of course, the main selling point of this game was the Nemesis. And yes, he was terrifying. For the first half. Nemesis was essentially meant to be the Tyrant 2.0. Somewhat like a Terminator, he was sent to eliminate all the witnesses of the mansion in Resident Evil 1. And the only witnesses left were Chris, Jill and Brad. I'm not sure exactly what happened to Chris at this point. In Resident Evil 5 he doesn't really go into details about what happened to him. So I am kind of wondering if the Resident Evil Code Veronica, which I got for free on Xbox Gold, which either be a good game or a bad game, which really depends. But I hope that game kind of explains what happened to Chris, because he sort of just vanished in Resident Evil 2's remake. So Nemesis is sent at Jill, he breaks in through her bedroom door and resumes chase. And Jill's just running through this building, dropping from floor to floor, and Nemesis just shows his unrelenting force. He'll smash down walls, he'll literally bring down the entire building just to try and kill this one person. Nemesis, compared to the Tyrant, was way scarier to me. The Tyrant was very restricted in his movements, he mostly just walked everywhere, and when you had a Magnum, he did become a joke. You could literally just shoot him twice in his head and he's down for the account. Even on hardcore difficulty, he didn't become scary when I played as Leon, because once you had a Magnum, he was toast. Or even when you had a flashbang, you just throw it by his feet and he's dazed and he's just flailing his arms about like, "Oh, where are you? You little bastards! You the Tyrant's eyes are sensitive to light." Admittedly though, Nemesis does have his weaknesses too, until you get a grenade launcher, which I never did on my Let's Play. I actually missed the grenade launcher, so his boss fight was a little bit more difficult for me. But when I did my second playthrough on hardcore mode, yeah, he did become a bit of a joke when I found the grenade launcher that time. I think it was like only 6 shots or maybe 7 and he went down, which was kind of pitiful. But of course this leads me to the downside of Nemesis, which was his final transformation. Cool design, underwhelming boss fight really. Sure, my Let's Play, if you've watched that, yeah, Nemesis does kill me a few times, but he's not entirely that scary anymore. He just gets reduced to becoming the G-Virus boss, which, if you remember from Resident Evil 2 Remake, the G-Virus wasn't a pursuing monster. It was just one of those bosses off the level. Once you beat the level, the G-Monster would arrive with a new transformation and a new weapon. You shoot him a few times in his giant eye, and he goes down to the next level. But that's exactly what happened with Nemesis in a way. After his final boss fight, in his monstrous form with the flamethrower, he comes back as this weird, beast-like monster, which, like I said, cool design, but yeah, his boss fights just started becoming just typical knock him on the floor and shoot his exposed heart. But yeah, weird plots aside, I really generally liked this game, and even though Nemesis did kind of get ruined by becoming the typical final boss at the end of a level, he was still a scary threat from the beginning of the game, and he truly showed us how dangerous a tyrant can be when they're not given any restraints and they just go all at it just to kill their target. The first game hinted at how powerful a tyrant could be, but we never saw the true potential of a tyrant. We kind of got a glimpse of it in the second game, but again, they kind of were just made to be a joke. Once Leon got a rocket launcher, the tyrant gets one shot by it. And this is meant to be the ultimate weapon for the government, yet a simple bazooka is enough to kill it. But Nemesis truly showed what an unstoppable monster was like. You had to resort into blowing him up, burning him, collapsing a building on him, and even melting him in acid, and that didn't even work. You had to use a bloody Kamehameha to kill him. So that's why I think Resident Evil 3's remake definitely deserves to be higher on the list. I know people might disagree with me about that, but I generally found the game really scary and even really fun to play over the others. And but let's just say this game definitely got beat out by the next game in terms of fun and gameplay. Number 2, Resident Evil 4. What is there to really say about this game that hasn't been said millions of times over? Resident Evil 4 was just a blast from beginning to end. I loved this game. The game starts out like a traditional Resident Evil game. You go to an area, you fight off a few zombies, rinse and repeat. But of course, the game starts getting a bit more chaotic as it goes on. For instance, these zombies actually are parasitic infected people. And not only that, if you shoot them in the head, they may burst out this weird tentacle monster. And not only that, the gameplay is just so fun with these type of enemies. For instance, you can shoot their arrows out of the air if they shoot them at you. You can shoot off their tools if you hit them enough. Or even when they're throwing dynamite at you, you can shoot the dynamite in their hand and blow them up. Shoot them in the head and daze them. You can run up to them and do a roundhouse kick and launch them 3 feet away. You could shoot them in their knee and do a suplex move on them. It was absolutely mad. Though for me, my favourite has to be leading them to an edge and just shooting them and they just all plummet down, just unceremoniously just falls to their doom. But there was so much variety with the amount of monsters that were in this game. Sure, you have the classic Chainsaw Larry guy who would just show up now and again to get in your way. But you also had these weird little invisible bug monsters that would appear sometimes, and you had to watch carefully and see where they were in the background. There were those Wolverine looking guys in the castle. There was the El Gigantes that would appear now and again. At one point you fight 2, and one of them's dressed like a gimp. So I think the El Gigantes multiply in a very disturbing way that I don't want to know about. And then the Regenerators. Holy crap. A monster that could heal as you fought it is terrifying. These Regenerators were generally uncomfortable. They moved slowly, and no matter where you shot them, it didn't matter because it could heal. You could blow off their head, you could shoot off their limbs, you could slice them to ribbons. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. Or even better, they could pull you in and release spikes into your body. That has been a horrid way to die by these monsters. All that changes though when you do find a weapon that could kill them, which I thought was satisfying. You avoid these monsters long enough that you eventually find the thing that notifies their weaknesses, and then you take them out. That doesn't eliminate their scariness though, because you still have to hit those weaknesses. And they're such small targets, it's so easy to miss them. Not only that, you needed to have saved enough money to specifically get this weapon in the first place. I'm not sure if you can find a sniper rifle on your own, so if you found a way that could reveal their weaknesses, unless you had the gun, you're doomed. Because you didn't save up enough money to get that. Or you could also just use an RPG. That works too. Many of Resident Evil 4's problems can easily be solved by an RPG. It is ridiculous. I guess that leads me to the next point. The many boss fights that you could have was so fun. Each unique from the other. It wasn't just shoot up this guy enough times and he'll die. And it wasn't a repeat of certain bosses. Sometimes. And they did kind of throw El Gigante. If you didn't do that optional bit, you essentially fight him 3 times, because there's at one point you do have to fight 2 at the same time. Yes, there's a unique way to deal with them, but at the same time it's like, you did just throw the same boss at me, and in that section it was such a bullet sponge that I had to use an RPG because the El Gigante just take up so many bullets. Chainsaw Larry, even though they repeated him a lot, was also a fun boss. I never kind of looked at him as a boss, really. I kind of looked at him more as kind of like the nemesis or the tyrant of these games. He would appear and you just had to shoot him enough times or keep at a distance that you could avoid him. Because if he caught you, you're instantly dead. Like the chainsaw was an instant kill weapon. Even the main boss, Sadler, holy crap, was such an entertaining villain. He was so wisecracking, he talked down to you so much, and he just mocked you. He was like the most entertaining villain Resident Evil's had. I would even say he was more entertaining than the Resident Evil 8 bosses. He just had so much character to him, and he was like enjoying every moment of torturing Leon. So yeah, I definitely do believe Resident Evil 4 deserves to be on this list. But what exactly beat out Resident Evil 4? If you watch my channel, it's a pretty obvious winner. Number 1. Resident Evil 8. It was obvious I was going to pick Resident Evil 8 as my favourite game I've played for this channel, specifically horror games. Where to start? So it took the elements that made Resident Evil 7 great and made Resident Evil 4 great and blended them in together. And what you got was a funner game from beginning to end. First of all, Ethan was actually given a much more deeper character in this game than he was in the previous game. But not only that, there was a lot of mystery around a lot of this game. Granted, a lot of the mystery was dumb and didn't make sense for one of the characters, which involved Chris killing Mia, which it didn't make sense why he kept that information away from Ethan till the end of the game. You would think this would be an important thing. It's, without spoiling it, when you do look up why Chris didn't tell Ethan about killing Mia, it doesn't make sense, really. But let's get on to the scary factor in this game. So, one of the first things you do when you enter this village is that you just witness the desolation of this one village. It doesn't look horrifying, it's just very eerie because it's empty, there's blood everywhere, there's all these crows that have been piked and they're just left across the area, there's these beheaded goats that are strewn about, and everywhere you're walking you're hearing something stalk you in the shadows and in the backgrounds of the village, and you're only given hints to what could have happened until you actually meet a villager who's so panicked and so scared he doesn't know what's going on, and then you see him get grabbed. And yeah, when you have to fight off this entire village of wolves, including one that wields a giant bloody hammer, yeah, it pretty much set the stage that these monsters are not your typical zombies. Sure, they can be easy to kill when it's just one, but when you have to deal with an army of them, Jesus. As well as the zombies though, you got witches this time. Well, they're still POWs, they're not actually witches. It was just more so that how their powers worked was more scientific than magic. You also got Lady Dimitrescu, who's a vampire, which I'm certain we've had vampire-like characters in Resident Evil. I could be wrong, but she was actually a really scary foe as well. Okay, let's be real here, most people like her because to them she's very attractive. And yeah, while I could say she definitely has a fine figure, I have to admit she was also scary. For instance, we're never actually exactly sure what exactly she is. Sure, she's tall and strong. Get in line. We've had plenty of guys like that before. What exactly makes you more unique than... I will devour all of you! Oh, that was one hell of a transformation, wasn't it? Oh. Right. I forgot this is a Resident Evil game where BOWs have unique powers. Eventually, you do actually come across the werewolf enemies, which are like these big wolf creatures that would just appear and just stalk after you. Your only safe haven was these buildings, but the problem is, you needed to get through the village to get to your next objective, and these guys were relentless. Like, you could kill them, sure, but they take up so much ammo, and they can jump on buildings, they could hide at places, and they could smell you out. So even if you thought you were safe in a building, they know you're in there, and they're just waiting for you to get out. There was also the giant guy with the hammer, who I will admit was a little bit more goofier than scary. Then even the main boss fight, Mother Miranda, as much as she was not that much of an entertaining villain like Sadler, her boss fight and her design was so entertaining, and she truly showed how powerful she was as an entity. And it made sense why all the other lords never tried to confront her, because, yeah, she's powerful. I will admit though, the horror factor does kind of disappear when you play as Chris in the game and it suddenly turns into Modern Warfare. Am I the only one that felt like, as fun as that section was, did feel out of place? I don't know, it just felt a bit weird. But, I loved it. I loved that game. It was so fun. And I really cannot wait for Resident Evil 9 or any future Resident Evil games. It was just so entertaining, and I loved every instance of that game. There was a few moments I was raging, that's only because I didn't understand what to do there. But that was on me mostly. I consider Resident Evil a masterpiece of a horror game, and if you're in a mood to play a really good horror game for Halloween, Resident Evil 8 is that game. It's great. So much of the game just features all your classic horrors. Vampires, witches, zombies, werewolves, sea monsters. But this game was essentially just an all-round fun, horror-themed map. And you got to freely explore. It was like a playhouse, like those horror playhouses, you know, you had all the classic monsters and you could interact and shoot them or run away from them all scared like. I love Resident Evil 8 and I consider it to be the best game I've played on my channel. And with that said, that brings an end to my first ever Billyween and also a celebration of reaching 100 subscribers. And I couldn't be more happier. I enjoy making YouTube videos. It's silly fun, I get to do it with my friends, and I really just don't see any point in slowing down now. I still have more videos planned for this year, and next year I also want to do more videos. Maybe even more videos like this again, now that I've got a face cam again, now that I've got my new laptop. So, I guess all I can say is thank you all for sticking with me all the way to 100 subscribers, and here's to 200 subscribers. And if you enjoyed this Billyween month of me playing all sorts of horror games and this whole list of my favourite horror games, I do appreciate it. And even though my game videos don't get as many views or likes as my Death Battle podcast, I don't see any point stopping doing gameplay videos. So you're going to pay me rent now? See, this is why you don't sleep with your bedroom door open, otherwise bastards like him just show up. So with all that said and done, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed Billyween, and as always, if you enjoyed what you saw here, be sure to share the video around and get the channel growing. Here's to Halloween. Oh, that's gone cold. Bye. There.